Welcome back to the Deep Dive. If you're looking for the essential knowledge, the ideas underpinning great systems of thought, well, you've definitely come to the right place. We aim to give you that necessary shortcut.
That's the goal.
And today, we are taking on something pretty significant. A really thorough, comprehensive deep dive into the foundational tenets of the religion of Islam.
Oh.
We're going to dissect the key ideas presented in the material you shared with us.
Absolutely. And our mission today, I think, is to move beyond just the surface level stuff. We really want to map out the, let's say, sophisticated structure of this faith.
Okay.
From how it views its own history, its claims of continuity, right through to the precise definitions of worship, practice, and what someone needs to believe internally.
And for you, the listener, what's the takeaway?
Well, the benefit is getting a clear, structured understanding, seeing how all these different pieces don't just exist in isolation, but how they actually interlock, how they form one comprehensive, integrated worldview.
Okay, great. Let's unpack this right from the very beginning then. What's the absolute core essence? The initial framing we have here defines Islam simply as a divine religion.
Mm-hmm.
But the real key seems to lie in the meaning of that word, Islam itself. Linguistically, it translates to submission and obedience. Obedience to the commands of God Almighty. That seems to be the philosophical anchor.
It really is. That linguistic root is crucial. The concept demands a complete intentional surrender. It's about a willful submission of oneself to God's will.
So it's not passive.
Not at all. It's presented as an active choice. And the natural flip side of that submission is consciously avoiding rebellion, avoiding disobedience. It sets up a kind of necessary hierarchy, you could say,
right,
where human actions, human desires are willingly subordinated to divine command. And that really sets the tone for, well, every principle and practice that follows.
Okay, so building on that, the materials immediately broaden the scope. They place the faith within this grand historical narrative. It's not presented as something entirely new popping up out of nowhere.
No, definitely not.
Instead, it's framed as the final religion revealed by God. That implies this deep thread of continuity running right through human history.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is how the source material really carefully details the lineage of this message. The narrative traces this continuous, singular message, essentially, the message of pure monotheism all the way back.
All the way back.
To the very first human, Prophet Adam. It establishes that this divine communication was carried forward, across different eras by these major figures, Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus.
Right.
This structure positions the faith not as a break with the past, but as the consistent, singular divine communication just delivered over millennia.
So it's presented less as a new faith and more as the ultimate fulfillment of this long, continuous prophetic chain.
Precisely.
And the sources state that the final link, the completion of that chain, is the prophethood of Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. What's significant about the mandate given to him? What makes his role distinct from those prophets who came before?
Well, his role is defined by two key things, according to this view. Its universality and its finality.
Okay.
While earlier prophets often had a message maybe for a specific group of people or a particular time.
Right, like for their tribe or nation.
Exactly. Muhammad was sent, the sources say, not just to one tribe or region, but to all mankind. That universal scope fundamentally changes the nature of the message. It shifts from regional guidance to a global mandate.
And the finality part.
The finality means that this completion signifies the end of divine law-giving and guidance for humanity in this way. It effectively closes the chapter on new prophetic revelation with the understanding that this final message is now complete and divinely protected.
Okay, that makes sense. So if that's the historical context, continuity, universality, finality, how is this faith then formalized? What's sort of technical interpretation we find in the sources?
Technically, the definition is quite precise. It's described as the religion of God, the one he has chosen for his servants, and the one he commanded his messengers to follow.
So a clear statement of divine origin and mandate.
Yes, it reinforces that this path is eternally willed by the Creator. But the absolute bedrock, the non-negotiable foundation of this technical definition is pure monotheism, the concept known in Arabic as tawhid.
We really need to pause on tawhid there, because it sounds like it's much more than just saying there's one God. It seems more complex. How do the sources detail this uncompromising oneness?
You're right, it's very foundational. The sources indicate that tawhid is generally understood through, three overlapping and essential categories. It shows the depth of the concept.
Hey, what's the first?
First, there's what's called the oneness of lordship. This means acknowledging that only God is the creator, the sustainer, the ultimate controller of everything in the universe. Full stop.
Right, the soul power.
Exactly. Second, there's the oneness of worship. This is crucial. It dictates that all acts of reverence, prayer, supplication, devotion, everything must be directed solely toward God. It demands the rejection of any form of polytheism, idolatry, or associating partners with him.
Okay, lordship and worship. And the third?
The third is the oneness of names and attributes. This means accepting that God is absolutely unique in his perfections and his attributes.
So?
He cannot be compared to his creation. His attributes, as revealed, must be accepted without human modification, without trying to imagine how they are or comparing them to created things. It's about accepting the divine description as it's given.
Wow.
And really, every law, every single practice, every belief flows directly from this foundational, non-negotiable concept of Tawhid. It ensures that the radical submission we talked about earlier, it's directed exclusively, absolutely, toward the Creator in every single dimension of life.
That really provides context. It shows how the faith is presented not as something totally new, but as the final, perfected continuation of earlier divine messages, all unified by this incredibly strict concept of pure monotheism.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've established the foundation,
Yep.
submission, monotheism, historical continuity. Now let's shift to the practical side. If you accept that definition, how do you actually live it day to day?
Right. How does it translate into action?
Yeah. And the sources point us directly to the 5 pillars of Islam. These are described as the foundational, the obligatory structure for actually practicing the faith.
That's a good way to put it. These pillars are the mandated rituals, the core commitments that give concrete form to that internal belief. They transform abstract conviction into, well, tangible action. They're like the regulatory framework for the life of a Muslim.
Makes sense. And the very first pillar, described as the essential gateway, the entry point to the faith, is the Shahada. That's the testimony of faith. It's a specific dual statement that has to be pronounced. I bear witness that there is no God but God, and I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of God. Why this specific declaration?
Because this declaration is the absolute starting point. It functions as both a verbal commitment and a spiritual contract. The first part, testifying to the absolute oneness of God, directly establishes the doctrine we just discussed, Tawhid.
Got it. And the second part?
The second part, testifying that Muhammad is a messenger of God, establishes the authority. It signifies acceptance. Acceptance that the prophet is the authorized interpreter and transmitter of that divine message. It shows the believer how that doctrine, Tawhid, is meant to be correctly understood and applied in practice.
So you need both halves for it to be complete.
Absolutely. Without both parts, the internal conviction isn't fully aligned with the framework, and the practical faith structured by the pillars really can't begin properly.
Okay, moving on then. The second pillar seems to introduce a profound level of discipline and structure into the daily routine, establishing prayer or salat. This requires performing 5 obligatory daily prayers. That sounds like a huge commitment, constantly interrupting the day.
It is an immense commitment, yes, and it seems deliberately designed to structure one's entire life around devotion. The requirement for 5 prayers daily at very specific times, dawn, noon, mid-afternoon, sunset, and night.
It forces you to stop whatever you're doing.
Precisely. It forces the believer to interrupt the flow, the demands of worldly life, multiple times every single day. And the prayer itself isn't just quiet contemplation, it's a highly ritualized sequence of actions and recitations. These units of prayer are called raka'at.
Can you describe that a bit? What does a raka'ah involve?
Sure. A single unit, a raka'at, involves specific postures and recitations in sequence. Typically, it includes standing upright, reciting parts of the Quran, then bowing down from the waist, that's called ruku, then returning upright briefly, and then prostrating fully on the ground, which is sujud, then usually sitting and prostrating again.
Wow, okay. And what does that physical ritual achieve, beyond just the act of devotion itself?
Well, the repetition, the specific physical postures, and the sheer regularity are meant to instill intense discipline. Also humility, especially in the prostration, and a constant awareness and mindfulness of God's presence throughout the day.
The prostration seems key there.
It is. It symbolizes the ultimate physical expression of that core concept of submission, of Islam itself. It's essentially a structured mechanism for practicing obedience and maintaining regularity, preventing life from just being swept away by purely secular concerns.
Right. Now, the third pillar brings in a very different dimension, more socioeconomic. Paying zakat, which is defined as obligatory charity. Crucially, the sources stress this isn't just, voluntary goodwill. It's mandated.
Yes, and this is where the social justice component of the faith is formalized as an actual act of worship. Zakat is defined very clearly as the obligatory charity. It's given annually by those Muslims who are considered wealthy, meaning they possess assets above a specific minimum threshold.
Is there a term for that threshold?
Yes, it's known as the nisab. And if someone's wealth stays above the nisab for a full lunar year, they're typically required to give 2.5% of that accumulated wealth.
2.5%. Why the specificity on the amount, the timing, the mechanism?
The rigor ensures it's a continuous regulated system, not just based on whim. And what's critical is the specific purpose laid out to help the poor and the needy, and also other specific categories of recipients defined in the scripture.
So it's targeted aid.
Exactly. It acts as a kind of purification for the wealthy person's remaining assets, and it ensures that resources are constantly being redistributed within the community. It's meant to prevent wealth from stagnating or becoming extremely concentrated. It solidifies that social responsibility is inherent in the faith, promoting economic circulation. It's a regulated system for resource redistribution framed as worship.
That distinction between just voluntary giving tzedakah and this legally binding obligatory zakat seems really vital to understanding its role.
It is.
Okay, now for the fourth pillar, one that gets a lot of global attention every year. Fasting during the month of Ramadan or Som. The parameters here sound incredibly strict.
They are, and they're designed for profound spiritual discipline. The core requirement is total abstinence, no food, no drink, and no sexual intercourse.
And the timing is very specific too.
Very specific. This abstinence period runs from the first light of dawn until the sun sets every single day for the entire lunar month of Ramadan. It's obviously a physical fast, but the sources emphasize its core purpose is actually mental and spiritual.
Okay, so beyond the physical hardship, what's the intended spiritual outcome? What are the sources emphasizing there?
The enforced physical abstentions are meant to cultivate intense self-control, patience, a key virtue called sabr, and also empathy.
Empathy. How so?
Well, by experiencing hunger and thirst firsthand, the believer is meant to gain a deeper, more visceral understanding and empathy for those who live with poverty and hunger regularly. It's framed as a collective annual reset button.
Right.
Training the will, focusing the mind entirely on devotion, on self-purification, and consciously redirecting focus away from bodily needs and desires towards spiritual reflection and introspection.
Okay. And finally, we arrive at the fifth pillar. This one often represents maybe the peak of spiritual and physical commitment for many. The pilgrimage to the Kaaba in Mecca, known as Hajj.
Yes, this is often seen as a monumental obligation. But, importantly, the sources include a key conditionality clause. It's only required once in a lifetime.
Only once.
Once in a lifetime as an obligation, yes. And even then, only for those who are able. This able means both physically fit enough for the rigors of the journey and financially capable, able to afford the trip and ensure their family is provided for while they're away.
So it's not a burden placed on everyone, regardless of circumstance.
Correct. But for those who are able, the commitment is immense. It involves performing a standardized set of rituals over several days, centered around the Kaaba, considered the house of God, and other significant sites in and around Mecca.
And symbolically, what does this incredible gathering achieve? You see millions of people there.
Symbolically, it represents absolute equality and global unity. During the main rites of Hajj, pilgrims shed all markers of wealth, status, and nationality by wearing simple, unstitched white garments.
Ah, the ihram clothing.
Exactly. This visually unifies all believers, standing shoulder to shoulder, regardless of where they come from or their social standing. It's considered the ultimate collective expression of the unity of God, Tawhid, and the unity of the human community submitting to his commands. It's perhaps the most significant collective act of worship in Islam.
Right. So we've covered the actions, the kind of physical structure provided by the pillars. Now we need to shift to the internal convictions, the necessary cognitive framework that presumably justifies and drives those actions.
Exactly. If the pillars are the what and how of practice, these are the why.
And these are the 6 basic principles or articles of faith. Without believing these, the pillars would just be empty rituals, right?
That's the idea. These principles constitute the foundational theology. They provide the underpinning rationale. And the first one, which we've already touched upon quite a bit, is the absolute center, belief in God.
And as we clarified earlier, this belief has to be absolute. God, as the sole creator, sustainer, the only one worthy of worship, and critically free from any partner or associate, this absolute singularity isn't just a one-time belief. It sounds like a continuous theological posture.
It really is. It serves as the constant guardrail, the firewall against any form of polytheism or divided loyalty. This belief demands that all worship, reliance, hope, fear, the core religious emotions are directed exclusively to the Creator. It establishes the definition of religious singularity and ensures the believer's inner compass remains calibrated solely to that one supreme authority.
Okay. Principle number 2 then moves into the unseen world. Belief in angels. The sources give some specific details about their nature. What stands out there?
What stands out is their nature and function. The sources specify that angels exist, that they are created from light, which is distinct from humans, created from clay, and jinn from smokeless fire, and their entire function is to carry out God's commands with absolute, unwavering obedience.
So they don't have free will like humans.
That's the key distinction. They are described as lacking the capacity for disobedience. This makes them pure agents of the divine will, not independent beings to be worshipped, prayed to, or sought help from. Understanding their nature beings of light, entirely subservient to command, reinforces their role as, perhaps, mediums for divine action or messengers, but never as subjects of devotion themselves.
Interesting. Okay, the third principle deals with divine guidance through history. Belief in the divine books. This requires a general acceptance of all the scriptures God revealed to his messengers previously.
Yes, exactly. There's a requirement for comprehensive respect and belief in the divine origin of all prior revelations. Things like the scrolls given to Abraham, the Torah revealed to Moses, the Psalms of David, the Gospel given to Jesus. Belief in their original divinely revealed form is necessary, but the source material explicitly highlights the Holy Quran as the most important of these books for Muslims today. Theologically, it's understood as the final, complete, and perfectly preserved revelation from God. Meaning, it confirms the essential truths of the previous scriptures, but also serves to clarify, correct any human alterations that may have crept into earlier texts, and in some cases it supersedes or abrogates specific legal rulings from previous dispensations that were meant for earlier times or peoples. So the Quran becomes the definitive primary source of law and theology for all time following its revelation.
Got it. Principle number 4 brings us right back to that historical thread we started with. Belief in the messengers. This requires a comprehensive acceptance connecting directly to that idea of continuity.
Absolutely. It ties it all together. This principle requires believing in all the prophets and messengers God sent throughout history, beginning with Adam and culminating finally with Muhammad.
You can't pick and choose.
No. According to this principle, you cannot fully accept the final message delivered by Muhammad without also acknowledging the validity and the divine origin of the long chain of transmission that came before him. The core message they all brought, Tawheed, submission to the one God, was fundamentally the same. So, accepting one prophet necessitates accepting the others recognized within the tradition.
Okay. Principle 5 looks towards the future, towards ultimate accountability. Belief in the last day. This is the day of judgment. It sounds like a powerful motivator for moral behavior now.
It's intended to be, yes. This belief in a future resurrection, a gathering of all humanity, and an inevitable accounting before God provides a system of ultimate justice. The conviction that every single person will be held accountable for all their deeds, big and small, good and bad, removes the potential ambiguity or perceived unfairness of temporary worldly justice.
Right, because not everything gets resolved here.
Exactly. So it transforms every choice, every intention, every action made in this life into something deeply consequential, an investment, if you will, in the life to come. This reinforces the moral imperative that's established by the pillars and the overall ethical framework.
Okay, and finally, we have what seems like one of the most philosophical, maybe even challenging principles, belief in predestination, or qadar. This requires believing that everything, absolutely everything, is predetermined by God.
Yes, this is often a point of deep reflection. It's the acceptance that everything in the universe, from the smallest particles movement to major cosmic events, and including one's own lifespan, sustenance, and ultimate destiny, is predestined by God. It flows from the belief in his absolute perfect knowledge and his complete control over all creation.
But that immediately raises a huge question, doesn't it? If everything is predestined, how can humans be held accountable for their actions, as Principle 5 just stated? It seems like a contradiction. Reconciling divine foreknowledge with human free will. That's the challenge.
It is. The critical tension and theological discussions on it are vast. How do the sources tend to approach this?
Well, the general understanding presented is that the reconciliation lies in distinguishing between God's absolute knowledge and his decree, versus the reality of human choice and capability that he has also granted.
Okay, so while God, in his timeless knowledge, knows everything that will happen, including our choices, and he permits or wills events to occur according to his wisdom, he has still gifted humanity with consciousness, reason, and the capacity to choose between right and wrong, between obedience and disobedience.
So the choice is real, even if God knows the outcome.
The choice is presented as real and meaningful. It's this genuine capacity to choose that makes accountability on the last day just and necessary. Belief in Qadar, then, is meant to offer solace and patience in times of hardship, knowing that nothing happens outside of God's wisdom and plan. But simultaneously, it doesn't negate the imperative for intensive moral effort and striving for good, because one's actions are the paths they choose, and that choice itself is real and has consequences. It's about accepting the divine master plan without abandoning personal moral responsibility.
That is indeed a complex balance. Full acceptance of divine will, yet full responsibility for one's own striving.
It is.
And that leads us perfectly into our final section. We've looked at the definition, submission, the actions, pillars, the beliefs, principles. If you combine all of that, what's the intended result? What should this system actually produce in a person's life and character? It seems the faith must translate into tangible, ethical results, perfected behavior in daily life.
Indeed. The whole system is designed to be comprehensive. It aims to produce a specific kind of character, a particular moral profile. The internal belief and the external ritual aren't ends in themselves. They must manifest as outward morality, as refined social conduct.
So just going through the motions isn't enough?
Exactly. It's not considered sufficient to merely check off the boxes of the pillars. One must strive to embody their spirit, their ethical implications.
Okay. And the source material actually provides a pretty detailed list of these encouraged virtues. It shows exactly where doctrine and ritual are meant to translate into practical morality. Let's try and connect these virtues back to the structure we've discussed. For instance, how does the rigorous discipline of the pillars help cultivate virtues like patience and modesty?
Well, patience, or sabr, as we mentioned, is arguably a central character trait cultivated by this practical framework. Think about fasting during Ramadan. That is a direct, intense, month-long training exercise in patience. It requires suppressing immediate physical desires, enduring discomfort, all for a higher spiritual goal. That same kind of patience is needed to perform the 5 daily prayers, salah, consistently, on time, even when you're busy or tired.
And modesty.
Modesty, which is emphasized both internally in attitude and externally in dress and behavior, flows quite naturally from that core concept of submission we started with. If you truly submit to God, it counters arrogance and promotes humility, which is foundational to modesty. It acts as a guard against the kind of pride that leads to rebellion against divine limits.
Okay, that makes sense. And when we look at the financial pillar, zakat, how does that drive virtues like generosity and charity?
Generosity is quite literally formalized through zakat, where giving a specific portion of one's wealth isn't optional, it's obligatory worship. But beyond that obligation, the sources strongly encourage voluntary charity, sadaqah. The underlying principle is to view wealth not as solely one's own property, but as a trust, a provision from God. Yes, a trust, amana, with a portion already having the right of the poor and needy attached to it. This systematic approach, both obligatory and voluntary, is designed to foster a mindset of continual giving, of looking out for others, and preventing a self-centered hoarding mentality.
We also see core character traits like truthfulness and humility heavily emphasized in the list.
Absolutely. Humility is vital because, theologically speaking, it's the direct antidote to the pride and arrogance considered the root of the original spiritual rebellion of Satan. The physical postures of prayer, especially the prostration with the forehead on the ground, are powerful daily physical reminders of humility before the Creator.
And truthfulness.
Truthfulness is paramount because it builds the social trust necessary for any healthy community to function. And if you connect it back to the belief in the last day,
where you're held accountable for everything.
Exactly. If the believer is convinced they'll be held accountable for every single deed and utterance, then truthfulness becomes an unavoidable moral commitment, not just a social nicety.
Right. The final virtues on the list here seem to focus very heavily on community interaction. Things like cooperation in good deeds, mercy, and helping others.
Yes, and this inclusion is really important because it demonstrates that the faith, despite its focus on individual accountability and worship, is not meant to be isolationist. The pillars themselves might seem individualistic at first glance, your prayer, your fast, but their purpose often extends outward.
How so?
Well, Hajj literally brings the entire world together in a display of unity. Zakat is explicitly designed to fund communal needs and support the vulnerable. Therefore, the intended moral outcome isn't just personal piety, but proactive social responsibility. It drives the believer to engage constructively with the community, showing mercy, actively cooperating in beneficial projects, and generally helping others. This comprehensive list really shows that the ultimate application of these core tenets is aimed at transforming the self into an ethically sound, socially responsible individual contributing positively within the larger human family.
That makes it very practical. For anyone trying to understand this segment is perhaps the most directly relevant. It demonstrates that the ultimate purpose of this deep and structured faith, according to these sources, is character refinement and making a positive contribution to society, all built upon that absolute theological foundation of Tawhid. #tag outro.
Well said.
So, we've journeyed today from the fundamental meaning of submission, right through the rigorous structure of the 5 practices, the pillars, and then into the profound conviction required by the 6 beliefs, the articles of faith. And we've seen how it all culminates, ideally, in a prescribed and pretty robust moral code. It really does seem like a system designed for wholeness, for clarity, and ultimately for accountability.
It is indeed a comprehensive framework. And perhaps, as you, the listener, reflect on this structure, maybe consider the profound implication of that principle we discussed near the end, reconciling the belief in predestination, Qadar, with the absolute expectation of moral striving, of choosing good, of exerting effort. If the ultimate destiny might be perceived as set, yet the faith simultaneously demands such intensive moral effort, such constant choosing of the right path. What then is the precise role and value of human effort within that divine equation? That tension, that interplay between absolute divine decree and the requirement for absolute human goodness and responsibility, that's really where the deep philosophical and practical engagement of the believer truly lies.
It's a truly challenging and foundational concept to leave us with. We certainly hope this deep dive has provided you with at least the structural clarity needed to grasp the foundations of this global faith, and importantly, how its different components are meant to interact and build upon one another.
Many thanks to the viewers and listeners of the Religious Channel. We leave you in God's care and protection. May God's peace, mercy, and blessings be upon you.